on Facebook, YouTube, and X. Thanks for making us part of your day. Special guest in the house today, something different, but he's great. He's fantastic. He's Greg Sanfilipino, a former Marine Corps veteran who served overseas and a former member of the NYC Police Force who specializes in intelligence and counterterrorism. He currently serves as a vice president at Doyle Security Services in NYC. Greg has decades of law enforcement and military experience working to identify criminal and terrorist activity. He's a graduate of Seton Hall University and holds a Master of Arts in Business and Organizational Security from Webster University. You can follow him at www.doylesecurityservices.com. Good afternoon, Greg. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be with us here today. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Camford.
So this guy Claudio Nieves Valente, 48, a former Brown student and a Portuguese national, was found dead Thursday evening from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, said Oscar Perez, the Providence police chief. Greg, is he the guy responsible for the Brown University shooting a few days ago? As a clear fact right now at this very moment, you can say?
Absolutely. All facts lead towards Claudio being the lone shooter in this instance, and to complicate the overall scope of this crime and investigation. It's not only in one spot, Brown University. It also spilled over to Brookline, Massachusetts, and then where he was ultimately found in Salem, New Hampshire, making this a true multi-state investigation.
Are we numb as a society? These school shootings at this time, now this happens more often than none. Are we just numb to it? We just hear it for a few days and then it's like on to the next story?
Well, hopefully, we don't move on to the next story, and this is one of those instances that we look at as a paradigm-changing incident, or when I say that, something that is a watershed, right? This changes perception, changes the way either law enforcement or private sector security approaches these instances, and works to not have a repeat of these instances, right? So when you look at other instances like Columbine, the changes that came from that, not only school shootings, whether you look at um, Parkland, another school shooting down in Florida, changes that came from that, 345 Park Avenue, the changes that have quickly been enacted and adopted by private sector security since that shooting just in June. You know, if we can get one bright takeaway from a horrific event, can we change the way we approach some of these to make sure that they don't happen again?
It seems like these guys normally act alone, right? There's never like a second accomplice, third accomplice. Why is that, you think?
It's a great question. Close to 99% of these, whether it be, active shooting events, although this one kind of fell a little bit outside the, the, the box, if you will, for these type of events based off of, what happened after that. But if you look at some of these instances, about 99% a lone shooter, and just from a practical standpoint, right, how hard is it to keep a secret from someone, in your family or coworkers? So when we look at these instances that have more than one shooter, then it becomes like, wow, how did they plan this? How did they go about this? And someone didn't, alert law enforcement, or someone else that would alert law enforcement. So it's why we see these so often being, again, the statistics close to 99% a single shooter, and then also the same statistics for male versus female. So a lot of analysis, it goes into this by law enforcement as to um, you know mindset and why these things happen.
Are campus police departments equipped the same way as city police?
Structure, I'd say the answer is yes. A lot of large universities are structured like small municipalities, small town police departments,
Right.
but there's so much more that goes into it when you're dealing with private sector where you have a lot of other influences that go into it, right? So everyone is is battling the resource constraints, right? How much money do we have to spend for infrastructure? How much money do we have to spend for security? How much money can we spend in technology? But when you look at private sector, you also have, you know, other factors that go into it, right? And education is a setting that you'll hear the term soft target, right? Open, and that's not done because the security is lax. It's that's the nature of education, right? To be open to ideas and sharing of information. So it's one of those challenges in education, similar to other sectors where the hospitality or hotels that need to be open, malls they need to be open. It's the nature of their business. So how do we apply layers of security into an environment that its very nature is open to for the best results of the students, right? We
Yep.
can't always just throw what we've referred to in the industry as the G's, right? The guards, the guns, the gates, and then expect that to be a good learning environment that we want to send our kids to, but at the same time, we want to send our kids to an environment that's safe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the protocols, right? I mean, these universities spend a lot of money on sports, right? Equipment, and you see all these facilities are great, but then there's like no security guards, maybe one or two or even three. Um, what kind of protocols need to be put in place? Because we see these things happen over and over and over again. It should be tighter, right? Nationwide.
Yeah, statistically, right, we see the stories happening in the news cycle, right? But when we break these down based off of actual, facts and what has happened, so the FBI puts out an active shooter report annually, and one of the things when we do, our active shooter response training is to highlight a little bit of the statistics, right? So when you look at, 20 over the last few years, one instance is too many, right? So, I'm not saying that this isn't something that needs to, you know, needs our attention, right? And needs to be at the forefront, but it's not as prevalent as we see based off of the media coverage, right? So you're looking at active shooting incidents, you know, in a high, a few years ago, 40 to 50 per year, way too many. But over the last few years, that number has gone down,
Yeah.
down into the high 20s. So when we look at schools specifically, we're talking about 5 or 6 per year on average, right? Without just pulling out all the with all the reports and
Sure.
statistics. So it's not as prevalent as we think. However, it is very, very troubling, and it's not something that's going away. So it needs to be addressed.
Were you surprised by when the shooting happened? So they couldn't find him for like 48 hours. You have FBI agents sifting through snow. Like it was just like a show, right? Like how surprised were you by they couldn't find this guy like right away or hours after this happened?
So as a civilian, right, very surprising.
Yeah.
As someone with the years of experience, not as surprising because of where it happened, right? This wasn't a large city, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, that has that many cameras around, right? So where we'll see in a large city is, although, take the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson,
Yeah.
right? there are so many other businesses around that have cameras that investigators will have access to. It's a lot quicker to find those camera feeds. And here, in a more rural setting, it's harder to find those camera feeds. And, they'll find them. Investigators, will turn over every stone. And here they did. It just takes longer.
Yeah, sure. Um,
What was
is
a little
this?
what was more surprising in this one was the information and the way the information was coming out.
Yeah,
So, initially, reports of that a shooter had been engaged and was, killed by law enforcement. Then that turned out to not be the case. Then, a suspect was apprehended, but then released because of the facts pointed that that wasn't the actual suspect that they were looking for. And every one of those pieces of information then gets released out, and you understand the balance. Like, hey, you know, the public wants answers, and we'll put, you know, agencies will put out information, and politicians will put out information, but if it's not accurate information, does that slow the investigation down, or then just cause people to get more alarmed or more annoyed because the information wasn't accurate?
sure. I don't know if you saw this. Providence Mayor Brett Smiley. He's writing to Mr. Patel about the tipster. He should get the $50,000. There's always a catch to these things, right? I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen. God blesses him if he gets the $50,000, but there's always a catch. You think this guy gets this money?
And this, yeah, this is he's been identified as John, and
Yeah,
in this case, I would say, like, what's the reason for for these tipster rewards? You want other people to come forward and say, hey, um, I have a piece of information that may fit, and ultimately that's what happened here. Thousands of tips that come forward, and just think about the sheer number of calls that come in, and what investigators have to go through, and ultimately why, as public the public citizens, we need to just be a little patient and understand that law enforcement is working through all these. But this is the reason why we put those rewards out there, and whether it's that, or someone starting a GoFundMe page, or some other citizen that steps out and says, like, this ultimately, and it's been in the press and reported by law enforcement and public officials up in that area, is like, this was a key piece.
yeah,
This, the camera feeds in this instance, which over the first 2 days, took a lot of of the press and the brunt of the reporting. They weren't great, and ultimately, what did lead to this, and you saw it also in the United Healthcare CEO shooting, right? These 1-800 tip lines, where investigators put out a piece of information. May not be all the information they have. A lot of times they withhold key pieces, so to make sure that those people that are putting in those tips, that's how they can weigh the false tips from the good tips, is they don't always put out every piece of information. But
right.
if the cameras have a good picture of a possible suspect, you would like them to be a little better than what they had put out in this case, which really leads me to believe was that the cameras weren't great, the initial camera feeds. That's
Sure.
a that's my suspicion at this point.
Of all places, Providence, Rhode Island, right? Big East, right? Like it's surreal. Like you said,
Yeah,
big
near
city. It would have been like hours later.
absolutely.
Is there a way, in your estimation, your opinion, this tragedy could have been prevented?
It's a tough ultimate question. Right, what every security professional, law enforcement, goes home with
Yeah,
is, did I do my best? Did I, fight for every piece of technology? Did I fight for every, a guard that we can have on post? Did I fight for, um, those resources? And, time will tell on this one. I know they're going to go through a comprehensive evaluation of from, soups to nuts, everything in through Brown University. And, you know, if that investigation is made public, some of it will be internal, and they'll find out where that balance, where they were off on the balance,
Yeah.
right? Because, you know, you see so many universities, a lot smaller, less resources that have committed, so much more to towards that technology, cutting edge as far as updating the cameras, artificial intelligence. There's so much that can go into a non-obtrusive, right, not in your face security program that initially doesn't look like was the case here.
What advice would you give to college students on campuses throughout the U.S. today, this moment in time?
It's a great question. A parent of a teenager who's on that right at that cusp of looking at universities, and I'm pretty sure uh, zero um, inflection on zero thought from a 16-year-old is going to go into is this someplace that's safe? I
Right.
can also guarantee you almost all the thought of both his parents are now are going to go into is this someplace that is safe, right? So I would tell college students now, those like my son that are on that threshold, is be a college student, understand that these things happen so infrequently. They don't happen a lot.
Right.
You'll hear the story, and this story will be in the press and the news cycle for a long time, and as well it should be, right? I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. It should be, because the more it's in the news cycle, the more we can, as security and law enforcement, we can get better at this. But you know, to the students and the public at the public in general, is like these are very infrequent. What the public safety and on universities, security is usually referred to as public safety officers.
Right.
They're doing, they're waking up night and day, and their only focus is keeping these students safe. So it works. In this instance, you had someone with an intended target. This wasn't um, typical. When I say typical, is what we normally hear of in this, where it was just someone that was on that pathway to violence and they just acted out.
Right.
Here it looks like the shooter, who attended Brown University, um, targeted Brown University, who looks like they went to school with the other target, Professor Nuno Lorio, the MIT professor, who was shot at Brookline, Massachusetts. So, here it looks like there was a clear goal by the shooter to target those institutions and people, and perhaps there was more. The investigation will uncover whether there was more that he didn't get a chance to, because law enforcement was closing in. But so these were targeted more so than we typically see in school shootings. So back to your question is, be a student, have fun, enjoy, focus on education. And my tip, is to, if you, it's cliche, right? If you see something, say something, but
Correct.
it's cliche because that just clearly um, is the perfect expression. But see what and say what to whom,
Right.
right? That's the takeaway. So we need to identify that when we see people on this pathway to violence, right? So what are the indicators? Fixated behavior towards a specific faculty or department, escalating grievance, or some sort of retaliation narrative, right? This could be in person or online.
Right.
Prior disciplinary, academic, employment disputes. We'll call them threat leakages, right? But this is just, someone hearing um, email, social media, or, you know, a friend saying, hey, Greg seemed a little off. He's not his normal self. He's
Right.
usually cheerful and now he's not, or he's usually grumpy and now he's not, right?
Yeah.
So those things that are off the off the norm, suspicious behavior, weapons, right? Those need to be reported. And here's where we really get on public safety and private security and law enforcement as to what's the mechanism to do that. Is there a way um, at Brown University, in this instance, for students to report those?
Right.
And we'll find out now as the investigation goes forward. And then, more importantly, is what's the culture in that institution? Do they take those seriously? Are there, you know, what we'll call interdisciplinary threat assessment teams, right? So that it's not only security, it's guidance counselors, it's administration, it's human resources, it's a multi faceted approach to, hey, so and so seems off. I'd like to alert somebody. I'm not looking to be a snitch, right? So if you grew up in my neighborhood back in the day, it was the adage, well,
Snitches
snitches
get
get
stitches.
stitches, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
keep, like, don't get involved. Well, there are mechanisms to get involved without being a snitch, to not get stitches, because you just want to alert that reporting mechanism, because maybe I need help. Not only maybe it's not a pathway, maybe I'm really early in the pathway to violence, and it's just that I have financial problems, or I'm having problems in a school setting, just being away from home. And once you alert the that mechanism, it's make there's resources to find me a group to get involved in, the resident advisors to get involved, right? It's not just, hey, if I report Greg in my hypothetical instance now, it's, he's not going to get in trouble. He's not going to get expelled. He hasn't, gotten to that level, but maybe we can get him some help.
Sure. This guy, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. You surprised by that? He took his own life. He didn't fight back. Was it the easy way out for him?
What was surprising is how long from the initial instance for him to do that. Not surprising, because this has become more so the norm in these instances. Because if you think about it on the mindset of somebody that's like, wow, what did it take them to get to this point,
Right.
to actually like create to do this horrific event? Then that becomes the culmination point. It's one of the reasons why I keep referring to them as a suspect or shooter. We mentioned his name in the beginning, but there's a movement. It's called the Don't Name Them. You could look up don'tnamethem.org,
Okay.
I believe, and it's, hey, a small piece of this is that these shooters, look to have their name memorialized, like in infamy. If we think about the Brian Thompson shooting,
Yeah.
right? I haven't mentioned that shooter's name. There's a whole cult behind that shooter,
Mm.
right? Um, here's a man that uh, you know executed in cold blood a father, a husband, and CEO of a business. He felt he had a grievance, but okay, but if we don't name them, and we don't continue to name them, we mark the people's names that we should. Nuno, Professor Nuno Lauria. You have Muhammad, and I don't want to insult the family by mispronouncing the last name. And then you have Ella, the two students who died at Brown University. And then we highlight, we don't have his full name, but John, who was one of the key tipsters,
Yeah.
maybe we take these instances and stop memorializing them by the shooter's name, which is ultimately what may have led them down this path. So um, it doesn't surprise me at all. It surprised me more initially that he looked to escape, that he, he showed up there. It looks like he had done his homework on where to, have the shooting. Looks like he did a little homework on camera coverage. He absolutely, did homework on changing license plates during the course of the multi-day manhunt. So you had a shooting suspect in a mass casualty event that went through extremes to hide his identity and escape. That was a little bit more surprising than ultimately finding that he, committed suicide days later. That it's a little bit more typical.
Talking to Greg Sanfilipino, a former Marine Corps veteran who served overseas and a former member of the NYC police force. What signs of trauma or anxiety should students and parents watch out for after shootings like this?
This is catastrophic when you look at getting back to you mentioned before, this educational setting and the age of the people that have witnessed this, the other survivors, and those are the obvious manifestations, right? We have to look at who was there, and who was present at the Barros and Holly Engineering Building on 13 December, but the the trauma that comes out of this, it may not be someone that was actually there. It may be someone that had some sort of affiliate, relationship with someone that had been there. It
Right.
may be someone that just based off their own personality, may just been someone that went to Brown uh, at that time, and maybe maybe an alumni who this triggers some sort of other traumatic event. So as a whole, the university really should and is investing a lot in that post-traumatic therapy and consultation. You also mentioned, you brought up um, Rhode Island and Providence, and there may be linkages to trauma that aren't just what are obvious to us, like someone that went to Brown. You brought up we had in a previous discussion, that I went to a Big East school in Providence in Rhode Island. So it could be someone that is at another Ivy League school or just in college in general. So
Yeah.
we really have to, these are vulnerable human beings at that stage in their life, right? Not only they're in their growth stage, their education stage, and all the stress that comes from being, in that education setting, all the stressors that come with being in college, let alone an Ivy League school.
Is counseling critical in the days following shootings like this? How important is it?
Days, weeks, months going, it continues. When you look at, highlighting a different instance, but 9/11, which a traumatic event, and then you look at organizations that are still providing um, victim counseling, because in ways that you'd never even imagine from just the initial event. So an organization that is near and dear to my heart is the Voices Center for Resilience. It grew from 9/11 and the victims' families, and now decades later, it continues to provide, and I'd be very surprised if they were not involved in victim resources here in Brown, because the organization, in New York, but also ties to New England. But you see it, it changes, right? Oh, we're just looking at someone that had been involved in the shooting, and then it gets to people that were related to the shooting, and then later on, how specifically those victims years later, how does it affect their family? The stress may not just be that student. It could be a student that actually is exhibiting no signs of stress, but as a parent, what's happening to the parents and the siblings back home. So
Yeah.
it's a out of my purview specifically as a security professional, but we do overlap a lot with victim advocacy, and it's something that's very important.
Sure. These kids on campuses, they talk amongst each other, faculty. How can they support each other moving forward? Does this bring them closer together than before?
I believe it does. Every out of every tragedy, you'll see the ties, the human ties, pulling each other together.
Right.
You mentioned 9/11 prior to that, and how we pull together as a society in the country, let alone New Yorkers. So from this, absolutely, and therein lies what you mentioned, like who are the outliers, who are not pulling together. They may be the ones that are showing the most signs of that post-traumatic stress.
Sure. Is there such thing as good hands, bad hands in terms of who carries a gun? Is there a thing? Is there such a thing?
Absolutely. We look at, and this happens all too often, right? These instances, they happen in blue states, they happen in red states. I don't believe that this is a political problem. But it's a problem, but I don't think it's one that just easily just becomes a political question. It becomes access to the firearms, where overall I think we need to do a a better job at making sure those bad hands don't get access to weapons. And in this case, the facts point to those being, legally obtained firearms.
Sure. You look at the rest of the world and the countries, it's just like these things just don't happen there. And those countries are bad. I mean, we're bad as well too. But this kind of thing in school campuses and shootings just doesn't happen as much as it does in the United States. When is enough enough, and what's going to change, you think, going forward?
Kevin, this is a great question. That's a question, that we need to address at a higher level than necessarily just, at the law enforcement level. And we need to, figure out what we want, how we want to address it,
Yeah,
in whether it be in particular states, municipalities, or overall the country in large. But, that's definitely highlights the fact that in law enforcement, and to some degree private sector security, operates at that executive level of government. And then like we you know the at the legislative level, the, the people in large
yeah,
get to decide. That doesn't come from law enforcement saying, hey, this is what we want
right.
overall. Like we operate based off of the legislature, and the laws of whether it be the municipality, state, or federal government.
As a parent, I'm not a parent. Maybe one day. Um, you can't be mad at parents saying, I'm just gonna homeschool my child. It's enough is enough. I've seen enough this day and age. You can't be mad at that, right? And should teachers be armed with firearms nationwide?
Those are a couple of great questions wrapped into one. I've met a whole lot of great colleagues that were homeschooled. This is a personal decision at the family level, and I don't think, as a parent, I would like anyone, even another parent, telling me how I should parent my child.
Right.
I would say, and this is not just to your question. I say this to everyone in general. Like, don't make fear that the driving decision maker, right? if you feel you can better homeschool your child, then homeschool your child, right? If you feel that you want to send your child to private school or public school and you're choosing to homeschool them only because you're fearful, then I would encourage you to, engage with who that those educational facilities, right? Those schools that you're contemplating sending your kid to, and talk to them, engage. I'm sure this is going to be a one of those things that comes from this event is other schools, whether it be colleges, high schools, private schools, are going to engage more with parents from a security standpoint, right? And historically, I don't think I've ever, you know, when I was going to, colleges, that anyone ever engaged, my parents on, how safe was necessarily was Seton Hall that I went to as an undergraduate. It was, hey, look at our heritage, look at the education, look at the sports, look at the student life, right? There's so many other ways that universities distinguish each other themselves from each other, and here, this is one of the I think the takeaways is going to be them engaging more on some of the public safety issues. So I would encourage the parents to engage with those schools and have a dialogue, and then make that decision based off of facts rather than just fear.
In your opinion, today, this very moment, chances are we see another school shooting on the campus anytime soon. This is it.
I would love to sit here and say, you heard it here first.
Right.
There's going to be no further school shootings. You know, it's just, it's one of those things that we can't as a society say, well, it's inevitable, and then throw our hands up and just take it, take it as an inevitable fact. As a security professional, I wake and go to bed every night trying to, make our clients' facilities safer. So, and I know um, on the other end, our clients do the same thing. So, um, very unlikely this is the last one, but we can make a difference.
Good.
If I mentioned before, the FBI active shooting reports, and if you take those year over year, 2024 was a big change from 22 to 23 in active shooting incidents across the board, every sector, a dramatic decrease. And you saw during that time frame a huge push towards active shooter training, right? What can you do? Not only if you're in an active shooting incident, run, hide, fight is the federal model. Avoid, barricade, confront is the New York City Police Department model. Regardless of what words you're using, what you do in if you're in that instance, can help save lives. But more importantly, prior to that, how can you help harden that facility? Can you do a, security and vulnerability assessment, to an honest assessment of like, hey, man, our cameras are 10, 15 years old. We're using, cameras that don't even rival, cell phones. Can we invest in that? Can we invest in, AI? Can we, where should we limit access? Where can we open up access? So that honest assessment with security and vulnerability assessments, which we do on a daily basis, helps that investment towards not seeing this happen as much as prior. And then the protective intelligence, the getting the information and sharing the information, like take this instance, like, are we going to have an honest assessment of the shooter? Are we going to get an open look at some of the key facts in his background that led him toward this path of violence? Are we going to share them? Are we going to share them across universities? Are we going to share it from a university to, you know, other critical infrastructure that's right outside the university. All that information sharing is so vital, and it's hard to say specifically, why they increase or why they decrease, but it's clear 2024 was a huge decrease, and you know, and then hopefully what we can see from these events is people digging in and committing not only just money to throw at it, and it's edu- educated resource investment towards that infrastructure and sharing information, protective intelligence, and assessments.
Sure. Hey, well said, man. Well said. Um, Before I let you go, a couple questions here off the top of my head. September 9/11, where were you on that day?
S- September 9/11, we'll get a little off track.
Yeah.
Also near and dear to my heart is football. I've played at high school level, joined the Marine Corps instead of playing in college, and then love to coach. So if you remember back, that was the Giants were playing the Denver Broncos. It was a replay of the Super Bowl, and it was a Monday Night Football game. They
Wow.
opened up Denver opened up a new stadium, and so that instance, I was on my way to work, and I wasn't at work at
Yep.
One Liberty Plaza. So I saw the second tower go down from the Staten Island side of the Staten Island Ferry, trying
Wow.
to make my way in.
Wow. That's crazy. When was the last time you ever got pulled over? Last time you got pulled over?
Last time getting pulled over,
Yeah. How'd you handle that?
that was let's see, that was just like 2 weeks ago, and just 2 weeks ago, and
Okay.
I didn't realize that a road I travel on a lot. I didn't realize that they had lowered the speed limit down to 25 from 35. So
Wow.
uh, engaged with a very professional, polite New Jersey state trooper
That's
who
good.
reminded me of the speed change.
No ticket. You got out of it, huh?
Well, he reminded me of the speed change. Um,
That's
very
good.
professional.
That's
Love
awesome.
New
What's
Jersey.
your favorite holiday movie of all time?
We might get into an argument with a lot of viewers here. My favorite holiday movie is Die Hard, and I don't
Wow.
know if it's 50-50 on. Man, I get into so many debates over that it not
Yeah,
being.
it's a touchy subject, man. It is. It is.
It it is, but coming from law enforcement and security, and not so much military in that one, but had some implications. But law enforcement, security, like I love watching that. Love watching that movie, and it's definitely absolutely it's a holiday movie.
Christmas your favorite holiday of all time?
It is
Okay.
um, partial, absolutely to this time of year, the time with family. This is why there's so many troops out there overseas, enabling us to spend the time with our families. Why so many law enforcement uh, officers are out there working, um, private sector security out there standing posts in the cold to help make us safer, provide us this opportunity. And I always try to reflect back, especially with the family, and letting my children, nieces, nephews, you know, not let them go through this and just, hey, it's great to open up presents, but let's understand, why we have this opportunity. There's a lot of people out there, on the front lines for us.
I have a great buddy of mine. He's a firefighter in Miami-Dade. I asked him this question months ago. He was on the show. Biggest drinkers, cops or firemen? What say you?
Well, absolutely, firemen.
Okay.
Um, argue that with all my firefighter friends.
Yeah.
Not so much, not so much, drinking from from an alcoholic beverage standpoint. It just look, if you work in an environment that allows you to in between in between putting your life on the line, which why we love firemen so much,
Yeah.
is in between those things, your job allows you to cook chili and stew.
Yeah.
It's one of the it's one of the greatest professions. So they have more opportunity in between calls
Yeah.
to drink
To
some egg.
indulge. Yeah. I know you're a Seton Hall Pirate grad, proud. Last time you were on campus was,
So that's a great question. Usually I'll go back and see the games at the Prudential Center.
yeah, the
So
Rock. Yeah.
it's been a while, a few yeah, it's been too long. But as I mentioned, now that my children are getting into that, hey, we know what college is, and let's take a look at some colleges. I have a campus visit coming up here in the near future, so it's been a while,
There you
too
go.
long.
So Rasheen, if you're listening, myself and Greg, we need some tickets, buddy. All right, hook us up with some tickets. We'll come see you. We'll come support, man.
Coach, if you're listening, amazing from Coach Willard to yourself. It's just amazing what you've done with the program, and love what you're doing, and keep it going, Coach.
There you go, Rasheen. For myself to Greg, miss you and keep up the hard work, man. Hey, Greg, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate your time coming on the show today. Any plugs for the listeners out there to get in contact with you and follow you what you're doing?
Thank you for the opportunity. So, DoyleSecurityServices.com, DOYLE, securityservices.com. You have the ability to request, if you have any questions. We did publish a report on the Brown University shooting, also the terrorist attack, the Hanukkah terrorist attack from Australia. So, if you'd like to request a copy, you can do so at DoyleSecurityServices.com.
I'm Kenford. He's Greg Sanfilipino. Great guy. Go follow him. Check him out. Does great work keeping us safe when we're sleeping. Eyes are always watching. We are out. This is Mic'd Up. Greg, happy holidays to you and everyone in your family, man.
Happy holidays, Kemford. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.